Welcome into episode 144 of The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. I'm Ken Ray.
And I'm August Trometer.
Where Khan went wrong, some of the Empire's greatest mistakes, and who are these space dudes anyway? Quiet voices, kids, we're going to the movies on this Summer Security Blockbuster edition of The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. Do you remember the Janine Garofalo bit about the? She did a thing years ago. It was her imitation of every movie trailer ever. Do you want to hear it?
Sure.
This is her imitation of every movie trailer ever. In a world. Oh wait! There was another one. It was in a town. It was in a world or in a town, and then Tommy Lee Jones does something. That was what she said, which will tell you about when that joke was written. It was a long time ago, not in the galaxy far, far away, one right near us. Here's what we're doing today. This show is actually coming out on the 4th of July. And that got me thinking, and we'll put those two and two together at the end of the show. But that got me thinking, there are lots of movies where technological gaffes have sort of cost the bad guy his goal, right? Bad guys were on their way to doing something, and then somebody used a technological vulnerability to bring the bad guy down. Of course, what I'm wondering is, what could the bad guy have done to do better? Or, better at being worse is the idea. So we're going to do 3 summer blockbusters from various years and talk about, where the bad guy went wrong, how best practices might have actually helped them ruin the day for everybody. We will start in the 23rd century. Admiral James T. Kirk is an instructor at Starfleet Academy and feeling old. The prospect of attending his ship, the USS Enterprise, now a training ship on a 2-week cadet cruise, doesn't make him feel any younger. But the training cruise becomes a deadly serious mission when his nemesis, Khan Noonien Singh, infamous conqueror from the late 20th century Earth, appears after years of exile. Khan later revealed that the planet Ceti Alpha 6 exploded and shifted the orbit of the 5th planet as a Mars-like haven. He begins capturing Project Genesis, a top-secret device holding the power of creation itself, and schemes the utter destruction of Kirk. Thus reads an incredibly dry IMDb telling of one of the greatest movies ever made. I mean, it goes Citizen Kane, The Godfather, Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan.
I don't know. I might even move Star Trek II higher in that list.
I don't know. See, I thought you were going to argue with me, but that's fine. I mean, to me, there are at least a couple of security lessons in this summer blockbuster, none of which were actually mentioned there in that recap. The biggest one, of course, is password security. I'm not kidding. Do you remember how it is that Kirk was able to best Khan the first time when they're having their first fight?
Absolutely. It's the prefix code, I think, is what they called it.
Right.
And not only is it something that Khan didn't know about or take care of or change, it is something that is only 6 digits and it's all numbers.
Well, in fairness, it was 1982. I mean, they didn't. But yeah, so here's what happens. Khan gets this spaceship, and it's a used spaceship, right? And he takes the used spaceship and he goes out, and what he doesn't think about is the fact that there are security access codes that he hasn't changed. And so then when he's facing off with the Enterprise is like, hey, I can actually try that old password. And it turns out that old password works, which of course enables the Enterprise to drop the Reliance shields, which of course saves the Enterprise's life.
Which, by the way, for somebody who admittedly says multiple times that he has an astounding intellect. You'd think that Khan would have stopped to go, hey, I wonder what, are there any vulnerabilities I need to worry about?
Yeah, it's interesting actually, because I found myself wondering a lot of times, like, how did he know all the stuff that he already knew? But then I remember in Space Seed, which is the Star Trek episode that Khan came from, in Space Seed, Kirk just gave him access to everything. Like, and Khan was just sitting there, just like reading everything he could about, ships like the Enterprise, which of course I assume is how he was able to run the Reliant. But this is getting a little too geeky. I mean, let's talk about the real, the real security thing here, because here's the thing. There was a story, and I spent probably a half hour today trying to find this story, and I just couldn't, because I couldn't remember the proper keywords. But there was a story earlier this year, or maybe late last year, about a young woman, I want to say in her teens, maybe in her early 20s, who all of a sudden was getting messages from another part of the world. What had happened was she had an iPhone. I can't remember what it was. It was an older model iPhone. She took it to a place to refurbish or recycle. I think the screen was so busted she couldn't even get into it, but they took those parts and made it back into a phone that could be sold someplace else. They sold the phone the other place. Phone hadn't been wiped. So all of her information that was now available to this dude in this other country who's like, hey, I like your friends on social media. Or social networks, excuse me. I like all of this. These are great pictures that you had taken. I mean, there really is. I know it's crazy to make that leap from Star Trek 2, but I mean, there's a lot to consider either when you're getting rid of old hardware or when you're picking up old hardware.
I don't think that's a leap at all. I think that's actually very spot on. And I do remember that story, and it was super, super creepy.
Yeah.
And all she had to do was erase her phone before she handed it over to somebody else, and she didn't.
Well, here's the problem, though. She couldn't see the screen. I mean, I want to say that they thought that the phone was... I want to say that she thought that the phone was beyond repair. I think.
Yeah, I don't want to place blame on her.
Yeah.
It's just, for the average, ordinary citizen.
Yeah.
When you take your phone in and you're going to get it, you're going to get a couple $100 for it because you're, trading it in or whatever. Just make sure to wipe it.
Yeah.
Because you never know where that phone's going to end up. And that's exactly what happened to her. And that's a perfect example of, what can happen. And to relate it back to the movie, Khan didn't wipe the ship.
Right.
He really didn't.
Or, the other thing that happens, and we hear about this a lot, you buy a piece of hardware. The hardware comes with a factory set password. It's not obvious how to go in and change that password, but go in and change that password. Because here's the thing. A lot of times, and we've talked about legislation coming in California where Internet of things are going to have to ship with, individual passwords as opposed to just one blanket password, 1, 2, 3, 4, or password or something along those lines. These companies expect you to go in and make sure that you don't leave the password as password, but a lot of people don't even realize that the thing's password protected. So, if you get something, whether it's an old thing or a new thing that comes with a preset password, the problem with that preset password is at least 2 people know that password, you and the company that sold it to you. But you don't know who at the company knows that password as well. You need to be the only person who knows that, or at least you and people you trust. You, your wife, your kid, whoever needs that access.
Absolutely. And you look at cable companies who provide you with Wi-Fi routers and all of that good stuff. And every single one of those devices, the login is admin and the password is password. And, this is not a secret. So it's not just 2 people who know.
Right. Right.
It's practically the world.
Right. So if Khan had listened to us, he'd still be alive today, 300 years from now.
Exactly.
Now, there is one other thing, and I'm skipping ahead a tiny bit here, but we're going to go to Star Trek 3 really quickly because a lot of people don't realize what happens in Star Trek 2 actually leads to Star Trek 2, 3, and 4. I mean, they're part 1, part 2, part 3 of sort of a longer arc. You go to Star Trek 3, don't cut corners. David Marcus used unstable protomatter in constructing the Genesis device. Not only did he make his work untenable, it actually led to something dangerous for everybody around him. This makes me think of you, honestly, because you've told me before about showing up at businesses, finding out that they had a lax security, let's say, and saying to them, no, this whole thing's going to blow up if you leave it this way. I know it's a pain to change it, but we have to take the long way around on this to make sure somebody else doesn't take a shortcut.
Oh, absolutely. And, again, this is a perfect example from the movie of what happens in everyday life where people, they take a shortcut because it gets the job done, but then they don't really understand the consequences of that shortcut. And especially when you're talking about security, those shortcuts are just deadly. They really are, because they compromise everything that you do. So when you sit there and go, oh, well, it was just really easier for us to have a single password for everybody to be able to log on because, it didn't cost us any extra money in terms of development time. And you sit there and you go, well, okay, well, that sounds great for your development time, but now everyone in the world has that password. And it's just like the protomatter. It's like, well, we're going to go ahead and take this shortcut. Don't know what's going to happen later down the road, but hey, I got the job done, right?
The Imperial forces, under orders from cruel Darth Vader, hold Princess Leia hostage in their efforts to quell the rebellion against the Galactic Empire. Luke Skywalker and Han Solo, captain of the Millennium Falcon, work together with a companionable droid duo, R2-D2 and C-3PO, to rescue the beautiful princess, help the Rebel Alliance, and restore freedom and justice to the galaxy. That, of course, is a synopsis of A Midsummer Night's Dream. Actually, it is an IMDb little golden book level synopsis of Star Wars, as it's rightly called, though if you need breadcrumbs, it's Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, the first and only Star Wars. Cool people call it Star Wars, okay? If you say Star Wars and somebody says which one, walk away. Just walk away. Because they'll call the rest of them by their proper names, okay? Way oversimplified there. I mean, that synopsis mentions none of our security concerns, of which there are a few. Augustrometer, where did the Empire go wrong?
There's not just a few. Oh, my goodness. I think, first of all, small problems lead to big problems.
Yes. This goes back to the lesson that David Marcus might have learned if he had survived being on the Genesis planet. He just took this one quick little shortcut, and he thought, well, that's not going to be a big deal. Turned out to be a huge deal. And then, of course, as you mentioned, the Empire has small problems, which get pretty big on the Death Star.
If you look at the original Star Wars, I think the reason the Empire failed was plain and simple hubris. They
evacuate in their moment of triumph.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And when Tarkin was told that there was a possible attack vector, he ignored it.
Right.
He's like, it's just the rebels. Don't worry about it. Only he did it with a much more beautiful British accent.
Yes. It's weird because if memory serves, they come back a couple of times to him.
Yes.
So the first time some guy is like, we've been looking over this and it seems like there might be a problem. And Tarkin's like, there's no problem at all. And the guy comes back, he's like, oh no, there is definitely a problem. And Tarkin's like, there's no problem. And of course, had he listened to that guy, and that guy apparently was listening to us, Governor Tarkin might still be alive today. I mean, it was a long time ago, I'll grant you, but he might actually be there. Now, I said that we actually mentioned this stuff, talked to the guys from Secure Mac as well. Nicholas Tacek, man, he made me laugh because we said, okay, we're going to do Star Wars. And he wrote back and said, I'd say the Empire wasn't looking at the entire threat landscape as far as the Death Star went. Sure, it had a huge laser that could take out entire planets or capital ships, as was the case with the second Death Star. And they had defenses well suited to hold off the attacks from larger ships. But once past the perimeter security of the surface guns, the trench was more or less wide open for attackers to exploit. Multiple layers of defense would have served them well. It's kind of like they had a firewall, the surface guns and TIE fighter squadrons, between their company network and the greater internet, including the rebel scum. But once the attackers got past the firewall and into the company intranet, the trench, there wasn't really any defense to speak of. I love that. It made me laugh out loud. And I know you're hearing that. Like, how does that make you laugh?
Well, I love the idea of taking a look at Star Wars and talking about the entire threat landscape.
Yeah. I mean, it really, here's the thing, though. It absolutely makes sense because I was thinking that hubris was their big problem. And I think you could argue that hubris was part of it. But I mean, they're like, no, we got this. I mean, because we've got all these guns. That's fine. And literally nobody said, what if somebody gets behind the guns?
Right. And into that little trench where we don't have that many guns.
Well, they do have guns there. Remember the guns stopped once Darth Vader came in because they didn't want to shoot him accidentally. That'd be a faux pas.
The thing is, I really think that the Death Star is a perfect example of kind of how people should approach security. And the notes from Nicholas Tacek they're spot on, because once you get inside the firewall, you've got access to everything. And we saw what was it earlier this week or late last week? NASA had disclosed a break-in on their security, and it's because somebody had taken a little Raspberry Pi computer and attached it to the network. They got completely past any firewalls that NASA had and just like latched it on and took all the data that they wanted. And that's the kind of thing that happened here with the Death Star, where, once the X-Wings got past the guns, they were good to go. And, all we needed was to use the Force, and we're boom.
Well, and you got to hit something, about the size of a womp rat.
Right.
Which, in fairness, is difficult. But here's the thing. No matter how difficult you think your security is, there's probably a way that you can strengthen it. Here's what I wonder about, though. Going a little bit deeper, because we've talked about this before, and certainly before you joined me on this show, I've talked about it with Nikolai as well. You've got so you've got the firewall, and getting past that firewall is no small feat. Once you get inside the firewall, though, what I hear both you and Nicholas saying is there should be more in the way of security. How do you find that balance between this is secure and this is so much of a pain that people are just not going to use it anyway? Or like, what kinds of things could you do? Like saying the Death Star is your business's security system. You've got a firewall. What else do you need at that point?
Sure. So, if you think about it, a firewall is sort of like, I don't know, the gate to your home. Mm-hmm. You've got this fence around your house, and if somebody gets on the other side of that fence, you're kind of toast. But what you really need is more fences. So you need a fence between the fence and the front door, and then you need a fence between the front door and, say, the bedrooms. And it's that kind of thing where if a business was really serious about security, they would segment every portion of their business and have firewalls around each portion. so that, just getting in past that front gate doesn't give you keys to the kingdom.
We'll help the bad guys through one more summer blockbuster in a moment. But first, a word about MacScan 3 from Secure Mac. Did you see the movie The Other Guys, August?
Yeah.
Yeah. For people who didn't, the premise was, while there were The Rock and Samuel L. Jackson, they were the capital H hero cops. Right, they were the ones they walked into the squad room and people just stood up and started applauding for no reason because they were the hero cops. And then Mark Wahlberg and Will Ferrell were the other guys, not flashy, not strong, just doing the grunt work. And in the end, they ended up being the heroes. MacScan 3 is the other guys. It is doing the grunt work that keeps your Mac safe. MacScan 3 is a great daily defense against malicious software attacks aimed at your Mac. It detects and removes Mac malware, catches keyloggers, removes tracking cookies, and provides full range or targeted scanning, all without crowding up your hard drive or slowing down your computer. All of this developed and backed by Secure Mac, trusted names in computer security and developers of exceptional security software for your Mac for well over a decade. Be your own hero with MacScan 3 as your sidekick. Sign up for a free 30-day trial today at securemac.com/MacScan. That's MacScan 3 by Secure Mac. Your 30-day free trial is waiting at securemac.com/MacScan.
And I will say that, no offense to Will Ferrell, but if Mark Wahlberg is going to stand between my front door and my Mac and protect it, I'm signing up.
All right. Well, this is not an endorsement from Mark Wahlberg, by the way. Just so you know. I don't know if that was actually a summer blockbuster or not, but we've got one more summer blockbuster that we want to hit. On July 2nd, communication systems worldwide are sent into chaos by a strange atmospheric interference. It's soon learned by the military that a number of enormous objects are on a collision course with Earth. At first thought to be meteors, they are later revealed to be gigantic spacecraft piloted by a mysterious alien species. After attempts to communicate with the aliens go nowhere, David Levinson, an ex-scientist turned cable technician, discovers that the aliens are going to attack major points around the globe in less than a day. On July 3rd, the aliens all but obliterate New York, Los Angeles, and Washington, as well as Paris, London, Houston, and Moscow. The survivors set out in convoys towards Area 51, a strange government testing ground where it is rumored the military has captured an alien spacecraft of their own. The survivors devise a plan to fight back against the enslaving aliens, and July 4th becomes the day humanity will fight for its freedom. July 4th is there.
Independence Day.
Actually, that's where the blurb stops on IMDb, but I'm pretty sure the implied last words are Independence Day, as you say. Summer blockbuster of 1996, a cast that could not be stopped. Will Smith, Jeff Goldblum, Vivica A. Fox, Judd Hirsch, Mary McDonnell, Harvey Fierstein, Randy Quaid, Brent Spiner. No, we're not out of stars, but I got stuff to do, so we're going to stop with Brent Spiner.
Where you should, because he top lines that entire list.
Yeah, I think so. While the blurb says the survivors devise a plan to fight back against the enslaving aliens, what they don't say is the plan that they devise is the kind of thing that we warn against here on the checklist. In fact, had the aliens been listening to us, they'd still be running the planet today. Now, it wouldn't surprise me if people don't remember how it was that we stopped the aliens in Independence Day, because kind of like Avatar, I remember seeing Independence Day. I remember, I guess, kind of enjoying it, although even then I was jaded enough to go, come on, really? The way they stopped the aliens, though, was with a computer virus. A computer virus, funny enough, delivered via Mac, which is kind of amusing.
Right. And programmed by Jeff Goldblum, who, is untouchable when it comes to sci-fi movies.
Absolutely.
So he can pretty much, he's like Superman in sci-fi movies. He can do anything.
Yeah. Well, except for the fly, which is kind of ironic because Superman could fly. And that did not work well for him.
It's funny to me that, number one, the aliens had no protection whatsoever. All he had to do was get inside the ship and throw them a virus, which basically took down the entire fleet of alien ships. Mm-hmm. And from if you want to relate it back to what we're talking about today, that goes back to the firewall and getting inside that front gate to your house.
I was going to say, not unlike the Empire, they might have been a little cocky.
Yeah, exactly. It also surprises me that any civilization of advanced intellect, obviously these aliens in the movie were of that because they came here to destroy us. It amazes me that they didn't have anybody on their side who was like trying to catch bad guys doing bad things. They didn't have any security researchers, which is really weird.
That is honestly a bit surprising. I mean, there are a couple of things I would challenge you on there. I mean, first of all, what's the best way to put it? There are lots of strong people with big guns who think they know everything. These aliens could be that. Seriously. I mean, there are lots of people who don't think in terms of security because they think, well, I've got this big ship. I've got this big plane. Thanos is a good example. I've got this big thing and nothing's going to get me. Well, I mean, it's like you said a minute ago. Go back to Governor Tarkin on the Death Star. He's got the Death Star. He's got the ability to blow up a planet. He thinks that's going to be enough to cow everybody. But if you're living on one of those planets, you're thinking, man, there's got to be a way around that or through it or something.
Well, and, honestly, I think it comes down to marketing. I mean, my goodness, the thing was called the Death Star. How could you not put all of your faith behind something called the Death Star?
Yeah, you make a good point. But now you've gone back to the last movie and we're on this one.
I know.
I mean, obviously the biggest thing, and this is going to sound crazy, but the biggest thing that the aliens could have done would have also been the simplest thing. Run a good antivirus suite.
No kidding. I mean, how hard is that, really?
Yeah, I mean, and maybe they just hadn't updated their definitions. That's possible. Because it was a long trip from where they came from. Because Jeff Goldblum did just write that.
Well, in fairness, and this is me picking on the movie just a little bit. It's weird to me that this alien species with alien technology shows up on our planet, and all of a sudden Jeff Goldblum knows how to program in whatever language they're using on their alien ship to be able to launch a virus. To me, that's a little weird.
Don't assume, though. I'm going to jump ahead, though, and maybe this is where you're going. Maybe it's not. Don't assume that because you're so good, somebody out there isn't better.
Oh, exactly. I'm going to talk about my brother for a second. He's paranoid about all of this stuff when it comes to security. And, I was talking to him about it one time and he's like, I'm not worried about somebody trying to steal secrets from my hard drive. He says, I'm really not. He says, I'm worried about the kid who's one house down who has all day to sit there and pick on my network. And really, that's what it comes down to is a lot of times, the average person doesn't have something that everyone wants. I mean, if you're Elon Musk, everyone's trying to break into your computer. I don't have everyone trying to break into my computer, but worrying about my neighbor who has an abundant amount of time on his hands because he's a high schooler, that's a little more concerning. And, my brother was right about that.
The aliens really didn't leave people that much time, though. I mean, you're not wrong. Your brother's not wrong either. I'm gonna wrap though with where we started. Well, not where we started, but where I was a minute ago. They should just be running good antivirus.
Yes, absolutely.
They really should. Hey, if you're looking for security news and how-tos, I was going to say more, but we're not really doing news today. We're going to the movies, or we went to the movies. I hope you enjoyed it. Please be sure and pick up all the stuff that's all over the place because other people are coming in.
Ken bought me popcorn. It was nice.
Yeah, well, you're welcome. I didn't realize I was buying you popcorn, but whatever. If you're looking for security news and how-tos, the place to look is securemac.com/checklist. You'll find notes for all the shows we've done to this point right there, securemac.com/checklist. You can also click through and listen to all the shows right there. So lots of checklist stuff to do. If you have a question you'd like to ask or a topic you would like to hear us hit, our email address is checklist@securemac.com. The address again is checklist@securemac.com. And if you can't remember that, please do remember this. You're listening to The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. And we'll talk to you next week.